Welcome. I'm Sister Shawn Kathleen, the coordinator of the Conference Center, the McGlinn Conference Center, Conference and Spirituality Center. The McGlinns were very kind to us and helped defray the expenses for this, so that's why you're sitting in this room today comfortably. Our sisters have agreed to pray for everyone who comes here. You have prayers of sisters over 400 Bernardine Franciscans, Associates of Volunteers in Mission in Mozambique, the Dominican Republic, 100 in Brazil, Liberia, West Africa. Pray for Sister Laureen there, please, with the Ebola and all that. And especially us here, too. We pray for you. But please pray for us also. We'd be very grateful. So you're welcome to our world. We're the mothers, the grandmothers of Alvernia University. As you know, it's just over 50 years old, so we're very proud of it. Gentlemen, if you need a restroom, they're outside the door to the right, about 20 feet. Ladies, they're right outside the door, more convenient for you. The lights and water are automatic. We do not need to call a plumber or an electrician, so we'll leave that at peace. There's also downstairs, there's extra restrooms, so make yourselves at home. So it's my undue or extraordinary pleasure to introduce a gentleman to my right, your left. We're also involved with Alvernia's board together. I won't leave it at that. He's distracting us sometimes. So El Sayed is our next person who will continue our program illustriously. Right, young man? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's my pleasure to start the night tonight, and I just wanted to welcome everyone for coming, and thank God it's not that cold as it has been in the past few nights. So we see people coming from around Berks County and beyond also. This time we're having people coming from Allentown and from other places. So it looks like we're going to have a good program tonight. And it's been 7 years since we started this CommonHeart, and it's been going really strong. But the thing is, we did not have time this time to work on advertising as we've been doing in the past year. So that's why also the number is not really as every year, but we are very blessed to have all of you here. We're going to start the program by having a prayer. We just bow our head for a few seconds. Thank you. And now it's my honor to introduce you the one and only Joe Painter as MC for the night. Joe?
Thank you. Thank you very much, and it's good to see you here. This is my third year back, and I am grateful to have been invited back in this world of chaos and turmoil that we live in. It is heartwarming to be able to get together and find that common ground. Where is that thread that holds the beautiful quilt of all of us together? Because we're all a panel on the quilt. And that's what we unearth this evening, and I'm very blessed to be here, and I'm grateful that you are. After the discussion, you will all have an opportunity to ask any questions that you want by writing that question on an index card, and the question does not have to be in line with the theme of tonight's discussion. It can be any question you have. Most fear and war is born out of ignorance of each other's faith. And you'll find this evening that while we all celebrate our own faiths, there's a whole lot of common ground, much more common ground than there is that doesn't match up. So the theme tonight, there is a theme each and every year that this is put together, is fostering the common good. And I was thinking about that quite a bit, and I could take it in a number of different directions. So I'm really interested and anxious to hear how our panelists will take that this evening. Let me welcome first, we're looking at really the three Abrahamic faiths. So we'll start with Catholicism. I was Christianity, Catholicism, I'll get it right. Sister Eileen is here, and Sister is with the Sisters of St. Francis. The bios of all of our panelists are in the program this evening, so I won't read those. Sister Eileen, fostering the common good.
Thank you, Jim. I'm not sure whether The idea here is because you're last, come forth the last to be first. And that's sort of how this happened today. We were asked to answer 3 different questions. Why does my faith call me to the common good? How do we foster the common good? And what is my personal experience of the common good? My faith as a Catholic is fostered and nurtured through Scripture, my church, and the life of Jesus Christ. Jesus, who told us, whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do to me. Jesus' whole public life was dealing with the poor and those in need. The kindness and the dignity in which he responded to the people in need was a living example for all of us. Love God with your whole heart and your neighbor as yourself. Today in our church, Pope Francis is reminding us of this. He looks at the church as a field hospital where we will bring those who are hurt and need healing. He says to us, the earth is a common place for all of us, and we are all sisters and brothers. Many of us can name so many who are striving to live the vision of the church, the vision of common good. Mother Teresa, who cared for those on the streets of India. Pope Leo in the 19th century, who noticed that workers were really being treated so badly, devised what we now call the Catholic social principles. But they were all based on the fact that he said we're created in the image and likeness of God. Today we see it in teenagers who go on to mission trips, the St. Vincent de Paul Society that provides food and financial help for people regardless of their race or their creed. In our church now, we have just begun the season of Lent. Lent is 40 days in preparation for Easter. During these days, we are reminded to pray, fast, and give alms. But the purpose of fasting is not deprivation of food only. The purpose of fasting, as Isaiah the prophet told us, was to release the bounds of those who are bound by injustice, to free the oppressed, to clothe the naked, and to share our bread with others. The alms that we will give during this season are taken to the Catholic relief services, which support missions throughout the world. And some will stay here for our own soup kitchens and needs in this area. Many churches provide food for people on holidays, collect that. They distribute food baskets for all the holidays. They collect for Covenant House, Mary's Shelter, and so many other needs in the common area. The neighbor who shovels the snow for someone else or removes the snow from the car. The one who checks on the senior citizens or the neighbors who may be homebound. All of these people are striving for the common good to make the earth a better place. I personally have been very blessed to be a member of the Sisters of St. Francis of Philadelphia, a community of vowed religious women founded 160 years ago in the city of Philadelphia. We were founded on the rule of St. Francis of Assisi, who believed that we are all brothers and sisters, and that the only way to reach God is to go out into the world and serve others. Initially, the sisters served the needs of immigrant people. Then they opened hospitals for those conflicted with the plague, later schools and orphanages. My sisters traveled by stagecoach in the West to work with the Native Americans, opened a hospital in Mississippi for Black pregnant women. Our mission states that we will serve the needs of others, especially the economically poor, the marginalized, and the oppressed. We direct our personal and corporate resources to the promotion of justice, peace, and reconciliation. Today, we see that happening with sisters in Africa, the Sudan, and in Ireland, and across this country. The involvement of sisters today may look different for many. We operate drop-in centers for immigrants and the homeless, resource centers for the poor, lobbying for the rights of immigration and the rights of people who have been human trafficking, for those against gun violence. We take a public stand on these things of those who are alienated from the economic mainstream, whether it's in the American cities, whether it's in South Africa, or whether it's in the factories of Bangladesh. Being involved in political business concerns as religious investors, which gives us the opportunity to work with corporations to put a human face on the many aspects of poverty, faith, and environment. Most recently, through some of that intercession, Walmart and several other companies are raising their hourly wage. I have had the opportunity to meet thousands of children and families, spending 29 years in education as an administrator and a teacher, as a pastoral associate, as a marriage counselor. Along with Sister Kathleen McGlinn, I had the privilege of missioning in a small rural church in the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Kentucky. During those years, with the help of our community and many generous people, we provided Christmas presents for over 100 families each year, new socks and underwear for kids going back to school. And you think that's an odd thing to provide, but if children don't get new socks and underwear, which many of them didn't, it was a great joy. We also opened a program, a countywide food bank. We ran a program for senior citizens to receive food on a monthly basis. And the joy of our life was we became foster parents. That ministry for over 13 years, and we have the privilege of having 18 children now call us Granny. Today we are working with Robin Ball to establish the Clare of Assisi House here in Reading, which will be a transitional house for women coming out of jail. This is just providing us one more opportunity to go out into the world. Thank you.
That's a lot of good. That was fostering the common good through the lens of Catholicism. And I'd like to welcome to the podium this evening Rabbi Brian Michelson, and we will look at the common good through the lens of Judaism.
There is a story told by a Hasidic rabbi by the name of Solomon ben Meir of Karlin, and he taught, if you want to raise a man from mud and filth, do not think it is enough to keep standing on top and reaching down to him a helping hand. You must go all the way down yourself, down into the mud and filth, then take hold of him with strong hands and pull him and yourself into the light. From the very biblical times, the issues of justice, compassion, kindness, and the common good have been part of the Jewish tradition. In the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, in the book of Deuteronomy, it teaches, Tzedek, Tzedek, Yirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. Unlike some of the commandments within Judaism that we simply do as the moment arises, you celebrate the holiday at the specific time. You leave the corners of your field for the poor when you are in the middle of the harvest. The concept of fostering justice is something that we are called to do more than just react to, but rather to be proactive towards. That's why the biblical prescription is justice, justice shall you pursue. One is to say you do it when it comes to you, and one is to say that you go out and you look for opportunities to do it. That it is not only the right thing to do, but our obligation to bring it into the world, to bring justice into the world. Sorry, I'm now starting to realize that the glasses are just a little too far, a little too close. So we make the idea that justice is not just an end. And another explanation for this particular verse of Torah, of why is justice repeated twice, is to say that it is to remind us that not only is justice the goal, but justice should be the way the goal is achieved. It is not just the ends, but the means matter as well. You must be just in getting to that just end. Judaism teaches that the act of creation also involved an act of destruction. When it says Yehi Or, and God said, let there be light, that the vessel that God had used to hold the light was shattered at that particular moment in time, allowing God to share light with the world. But we are also taught that for the world to be perfect, that vessel must be rebuilt, that we must bring wholeness back into the world. And the idea within Judaism, it is taught a value is called tikkun olam, repairing the world. The idea that we are meant to be God's partners in perfecting the world, bringing peace, bringing wholeness to the world, bringing justice and right to the world. That it is not something that we wait for somebody else to do, but we are called upon to do it at every moment and at every opportunity that we have. Instead, it is a responsibility, it is a responsibility more than just passively waiting to do it. The biblical material is full of commands that call us to act with justice and fairness in the world. Our obligation to the poor, to the widow, and the orphan, the most at-risk populations in society, at least by biblical standards, is mentioned numerous times, and our obligation to care and provide for their needs is mentioned over and over again. Acts of justice themselves fall into three different categories. First, it's tzedakah, often translated as charity. However, this translation is really not a good one. Charity, the word itself comes from the Latin charitas, suggests a donation made out of affection or love. In contrast, tzedakah derives from the word tzedek, which is an act of justice or righteousness. Rabbi Elliot Dorff notes that charity creates the impression that someone who provides money for charitable causes or engages in acts of charity is an unusually good person, going beyond the call of duty. In contrast, tzedakah, the association with the word for justice, implies that caring for the poor is not an unusually good act, but rather simply what is expected of us. Tzedakah is more than just money. It is the actions that we take in the pursuit of fairness. The corners of our field, to tithing, to the involvement in social justice causes, we're not only supposed to help in the short term, but to help fix the systemic problems that cause the injustice in the first place. The second part of creating the common good from a Jewish perspective would be kindness, gimilut chasadim. Acts of loving kindness are regarded as something in which all people must engage. And kindness and charity are not the same thing. Charity is done with money, but kindness can be done using money or using our bodies by helping somebody cross the street, plowing the neighbor's walkway, helping somebody by what we do. Charity is given only to the poor. Kindness is called for to all people, rich and poor alike. Charity is only for the benefit of the living. Kindness can be performed for both the living and the dead. For example, a community's understanding that it has obligation to bury its dead, whether they can afford burial or not. And finally, charity is performed when an opportunity presents itself, whereas kindness is something that can be offered at any time. The third idea of working for the common good that I'd like to speak about is an issue called derech eretz, literally the way of the world, the proper treatment for the sake of proper treatment. Beginning in the Torah, in the beginning of the Torah, the first 11 chapters of the scroll are about human history, not about Jewish history. It isn't until about 1,000 years into the story that Abraham comes along and becomes the first Israelite. Those first 11 chapters tell the history of the world, of the obligations we have of the human condition. It teaches that when we were created, as Sister mentioned, we are all made in the image of God. And in Hebrew we use the term B'Tselem Elohim. And the idea that we are made B'Tselem Elohim in that image means that we each know the difference between right and wrong, that we all have the freedom to choose. Because we are made in the image of God, life has special value, and all life is equal in that value. And that God created all of humanity and wants a better world for all people, not just the Jewish people, the Catholics, the Muslims, but for each and every one of us. How do we see this? What is an example of this? We turn to the book of Jonah as the perfect example, where God in the Hebrew Bible sends a prophet to save the people of Nineveh, an Assyrian city, arch enemies to the ancient Israelites, saying that compassion, love, caring, and good are not meant to be just for you, but are available to us all, to everyone. So how do we foster the common good? We do it by our actions and not our thoughts. Within Judaism, we are measured by what we do. We must live in the world and face it for what it is and make up for what it lacks. Almost every holiday within Judaism includes some sort of act of tzedakah or some act of giving. You can never go wrong from a Jewish perspective by setting some money aside to give to the poor, to the hungry. Active participation in our community and beyond. The Reform movement of which I'm affiliated with, we have a national center called the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism in Washington, D.C. It is used to motivate and cause people to participate in voicing our opinions to our leaders on issues of public policy. The man who ran it for many, many years, a colleague of mine, Rabbi David Saperstein, was just named as the U.S. Ambassador for Religious Rights. Serves as a rabbi to make sure the common good is served, not through what he has said, but through what he has done. My own experience with the common good. I will never forget the fact that I was lucky enough to know my great-grandmother. She was a woman who lived on Social Security. Never had very much, but every time her house was visited, one of the first things you did upon walking in the door was she gave you a few coins to drop in the tzedakah box, to drop in the little pushki, the little jar that went to give money to the poor. Sometimes even though she didn't have a whole lot herself, she always looked up and said, we always have to give because there's always somebody else who's worse off than we are. And we give thanks by giving what we have. That memory for me is one of those things that continually makes me work to change the world. If she could do it with just a few coins, it also reminds us that the coins add up to big money, that we can make a difference a little bit at a time. We also understand that sometimes the more we give, the more we get. And recently I had one of those opportunities to enjoy the flow back of our actions. Oheb Shalom was one of the first congregations in town that was involved with Family Promise. And I insisted that the very first time the synagogue hosted, that the first overnight was going to be mine to do. I was not going to ask anybody else to do anything that I wasn't willing to do myself. Earlier this year, I was at a function at one of the churches in town. And after the service, a woman comes up to me and says, I don't know if you remember me. I was one of the first 3 families that you welcomed into your synagogue on that first night. You sat with us and you talked, you treated us with dignity. I'm now living on my own and have been in my own apartment now for 4 years. My children have grown and they are safe. Something that I barely remembered made a difference to her. She came back to say thank you. The reward for doing is far greater than the reward for giving. Finally, the idea is that we pay it forward. The concept is that sometimes the changes that we need to make are not about the benefits that we will reap. There's an old Talmudic story about a man who is planting a tree by the side of the road, and somebody comes up to him and says, "What kind of tree are you planting?" And the old man looks back and says, "I'm planting a carob tree." And the man looks at him and says, "Why would you be planting a carob tree? A carob tree takes 50 years to fruit for the very first time. you'll never be alive to see its fruit. The man looks back at the questioner and says, I don't plant it for me. I plant it for my children and for my grandchildren, that their world may be a better place. Let me end with words that say it probably better than I ever can. Words that were written in March of 1944 in a young woman's diary we've heard before. The words of Anne Frank. How lovely to think that no one need wait a moment before making the world better. We can start now slowly changing the world. You can always, always, always give something, even if it is only kindness. Give again. Don't lose courage. Keep it up and keep on giving. No one has ever become poor from giving. Thank you.
So already, come on, you're sitting in your seat going, what am I doing? I know what's happening. Happened to me over there. I'm listening to this. I gotta get out there and do something. Common good. So we're learning a lot about that. And Rabbi Brian Michelson is with Reform Congregation Oheb Shalom. And now let's take a look at fostering the common good through the eyes of Islam. And I'd like to welcome to the stadium, the podium, from the Islamic Center of Reading, Sheikh Walid.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أصحابه أجمعين وسائر الأنبياء. So I begin with the invocation that Muslims say at the beginning of all prayers, and at the invocation that is said at the beginning of all matters that are important. In the name of Allah, or the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. And I also begin with the prayer of Moses, where he said, when God spoke to him and he was being sent to Pharaoh, he said, رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. Make my heart ready and pure for this great message that I'm about to carry. Make my matter easy, facilitate it, help me speak and have penetration for the words I'm about to say. So I invoke the same prayer that Moses said, as we have read in the Quran. And I have to admit, after listening to Sister Arlene and Rabbi Brian, I heard many things that I was wanted to say, so they're kind of not left with much material. But
You wanted to go last.
yeah, I think that's true. So, but I thought about this a lot, common good. We don't really have a term for it. Arabic is our liturgical language, much in the same way that I would suppose Latin would be, or has become for the Catholics, and Hebrew for the Jews. But the interesting thing about language is there's a lot of commonality in language. When I heard Father Rabbi Brian speaking about sadaqah, we actually have the same exact word in Arabic, and that's no surprise because they're both Semitic languages. So the language that Moses and Abraham spoke, Hebrew, the language that Muhammad spoke, Arabic, and purportedly the language that Jesus spoke, either Aramaic or Hebrew, whether you call your God Yahweh or Ha Elohim or Allah, it's all the same God that we're talking about. So I believe the common good actually begins with a common God. And I know for many people, especially in this country, I like to say things straight. I was born in Brooklyn, so I just come things as they may. Many people have many questions about Islam, especially about things that are happening in the media, things that are being reported overseas. I recently moved to this area from Cairo, and I've spent the better part of the last 15 years in the Middle East. And I have to admit to you, that area that I grew up or came to love over this past decade and a half is in a complete state of disarray. It's almost in ruins. We have several countries that are no longer countries, that are failed states, whatever you want to say. And that's something that pains many Muslims nowadays. So the same things that would pain all of you also pain all of us. And I think it's important that we realize this in the context of the common good is that our prophetic teachings teach us that the common good should be extended to anyone and everyone, no matter what their background is, no matter what religious affiliation they may have, no matter what the color of their skin. The Arabic word that I was about to mention earlier, al-ma'ruf. And ma'ruf, if you look at the etymology of the word in Arabic, it has two major meanings. One of them being that which is known. So when you say something is ma'ruf, you mean it is known. In other words, it's so self-evident, so there for people to appreciate that it's just kind of a common thing, right? And the fabric of our societies, maybe not so much today, but I can recall a time, even when I was growing up in this country, that people who knew who their neighbors were. I used to play in the street. I used to live in Staten Island. We had a beach close to the house. You'd go down to the beach. You'd, run your bike over the beach and things like this. And I had Italian friends who were Catholics, and I had many, many Jewish friends. And we didn't really think much about what our religion was, what our background was, but we had this common fabric of society. Those were the days when you still had block parties. I don't know if people remember those days, but it seems like so far away now. But and that's something I believe I gained from my parents, something that I gained from my religion, to think about how do I deal with the other. Our Prophet ﷺ, he was reported to have said, ad-din al-mu'amala, that deen, in other words, how you deal with other people, is in fact who you are, is how you deal with other people. So we don't have a criteria in our religion where your piety is measured by how many prayers you offer, how many invocations that you make, how often you go to the mosque, how much you give in charity. These are all very meritorious things. But the most important criteria is how do you deal with others. And in fact, our Prophet Muhammad rebuked people who may have been very pious in their prayer, may have been very pious in their reading of scripture, but that did not reflect in their dealings with people. And in fact, some of the closest people to him, he would rebuke them. One time, one of his companions led people in prayer. And as you may be familiar with, the Muslim prayer usually doesn't take more about 4 or 5 minutes, but he actually led quite a long prayer, unreasonably so. And so he rebuked him. He said, are you trying to try the people? Are you trying to give them tribulation by having this very long prayer? Because when you're dealing with people behind you, you have the sick, you have the infirm, you have people with children. The Prophet, he would hear babies crying behind him, and he would shorten the prayer. Right? So these, as Rabbi Brian mentioned, these small kindnesses, this is something that we understand from the common good. And in fact, one's level of piety, as I mentioned, is completely commensurate with how well you can perform the common good, how well you can perform the ma'ruf. And the Prophet even said, if your prayers are not helping you to be nice to people, to be kind to people, to bring favors to people, then your prayer is not benefiting you. So he was very, very adamant about this. We as religious people, I think most of the people in this room, we have a lot of struggles that we're dealing with today. And one of those struggles, I think, is that people generally tend to think of us perhaps as sanctimonious, a holier-than-thou attitude. And I would have to admit, many of my co-religionists, certainly I could not falter those who would find that impression with the way that they act. When you have this kind of attitude that because of my prayers, because of my piety, then I am a better person than you. And on a personal note, I have found many people who are demonstrably show me the common good and have taught me the common good who are not even Muslims. I've had the good fortune of traveling to many parts of the world. One of the more memorable trips that I did have was to Africa, in Kenya. And there, Africa is the most amazing continent I've ever been to, really. I mean, the people there just have this this kind of very immediate friendliness about them. There's no hang-ups, there's no kind of looking at you, there's no evaluation. You know what they say now, judgment-free zone? All of Africa is a judgment-free zone. You would find people on Sundays out in the streets. Africans love to dance, and so even during their Sunday Mass or whatever that they were doing, they would be out on the street singing and dancing, and Muslims would do the same thing, because they would, on Fridays, they would also do their type of ritual dancing that was also there in Africa. So I saw that in that particular culture, these people had a commonality that transcended their religion. right? Transcended their particular religious affiliations. And I think we as a people, especially here in American society, we need to get past, I think, collectively, many of these hang-ups that we may have about the other. You know, we divide people along race, we divide people along religion, we divide people along even political affiliation, right? Republicans and Democrats and so forth, neocons, and you have the Tea Party and the Republican Party and so forth. And I think really what's really the common thing about all of us? On what should we base the common good? We have a common humanity. We're all human beings at the end of the day, right? We all bleed red, no matter what our colors are, no matter, you know, at the end of the day, 100 years from now, we're all going to be in the ground. No one will be surviving. And so what we do, the seeds that we plant now for the generations to come, are extremely important, right? If we don't set it straight now with our children and their children with their grandchildren, then we'll have the same world 100 years from now, or perhaps even worse. So I think that we as Muslims, we see our religion as a vehicle for spiritual guidance, for spiritual purification. And you will not be a reliable exemplar of the common good until you yourself have been transformed, until you yourself have been spiritually transformed. Otherwise, it comes off as sanctimony, right? Otherwise, if you're trying to enforce the good or trying to get people to be better people, but you yourself are not a good person, you yourself are not demonstrating that transformation. So I think we all have to go individual self-transformation. And in our particular tradition, we have schools of thought, various schools of thought that are complementary, not contradictory, and how we go about this kind of spiritual transformation. And it begins by removing one's vices. So how do we foster the common good, at least in my life? It begins with education. It begins with removing one's own vices. We have envy, we have anger, we have hatred, we have acrimony, we have enmity, we have ignorance, right? And we need to replace these vices with virtues, right? Which is common across all religions. You know, even Aristotle talked about the virtues. You know, and you know, I've read some of St. Thomas Aquinas, and to be honest with you, if I wasn't Muslim, I'd be a Thomist. I mean, because St. Thomas Aquinas kind of echoed many of the very same theology that we respect in our own religious teachers, such as Abu Hamid Imam al-Ghazali, who lived less than a century before Aquinas. And so they talked about the idea of virtue being a balance between two extremes. So we don't want to be reckless, nor do we want to be cowards, but we want to be brave, which is a medium, a balance between the two extremes. So the extremism that many of us sort of oscillate between, it's because we can't really place that balance, that virtue. And I think the power of religion, and not just any religion, the power of disciplined, good, guided, transmitted one generation to the next type of religion, has the power to do that, to transform people. Right? As you know, we say, and as the Catholics say, and as the Jews say, you know, today's sinner could be tomorrow's saint. And there's always time for redemption. It's never too late. You could be right before your last breath, and then the enlightenment, the opening, the illumination comes to that particular person, and they're not beyond redemption. So we hold out that hope, we hold out that promise, that redemption, especially for us and for all our brothers and sisters in humanity, collectively. We know that our religion guides to good. There are members of our faith who may be practicing a different form that we don't agree with, but as far as we're concerned, we try to be those exemplars. And we feel that we're following the authentic prophetic teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, which are no different than the prophetic teachings of Abraham or Moses or Noah or Jesus. May peace be upon them all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh Walid, and Rabbi Brian, and Sister Eileen. There's a thought that keeps resonating as I heard all three of you speak and say a lot of the same thing. The message is the same, whether it's from the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran, and we are called to do the same thing. And I look at the three of you and talking about it so eloquently, and all I keep thinking is, blessed are the peacemakers, for you will be called the children of God. So thank you. Thank you for doing that right here and calling all of us to do the same thing. So true, so true. Just quickly, I've one. The message was the same. Do you agree with that? We are all called in all faiths through every lens to do the same thing, to do good. The haves helping the have-nots, be kind. And in each of the three religions, we're doing it within that institution. Have we grown to cross institutions? And everybody's saying that doesn't matter what your faith is, help others. But have the Catholics stepped over and helped in the synagogue or in the Islamic center? Is there a cross and commonality in that regard yet here in Berks County? Oops.
I think that there has been certainly a great deal of progress that is made. CommonHeart, as an example of
Yes.
that, is true to that message. There are programs like the Family Promise program that was mentioned, the various soup kitchens that are involved. So yesterday I was working with the folks from my congregation who are in one of the soup kitchens that's in a church, and we do it because that's where the help is needed. That's where the good needs to be done, and so I think we are making the progress. There is still more work to be done, and the other part of it is some of it is also about directing our efforts not only to within the religious community but to the broader community, and those opportunities where we can work together as religious communities. I know El Said and I have talked about the fact that we have our big food festival every year, and we've been trying to work on getting the teens together to do some volunteering, just so they have the opportunity of coming together to work for a goal, work for the common good together, because that also sends the same message that we're talking about here, is that we all really are working towards the same thing, whether we do it through Islam, Catholicism, or Judaism.
That came through very loud and clear this evening, and there's a bit of a cross-pollination that's going on. And nice to know, too, and I don't know if that's been brought out, Common Good at 7 years, you have a youth group as well. And I've heard each of you mention it's important to go intergenerational. I've learned from my grandparents, I've learned from the elders, so we are now the persons who set the tone. There are index cards at the back and pens, so please, any questions that you have about anything of any of our panelists, write that question down. We'll get back to this, but before we take a break, I would like to welcome El Sayed back to the podium for a very special word.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before we go to the break, I just thought about something, and I must do, because it will not be fair for us to end up the night without paying a tribute to one of the people who started and put the seeds for this CommonHeart alongside Father Phil, Rabbi Michelson, and myself. The person who really was taking care of all the logistics and was putting us in line and telling us what to do all the way to just before we came in here. I'd like to call Jo Pressamon, because this is her last year to be involved in this, and she's been involved with us for the past 7 years. And really, we hate to see her leave, but she's leaving for a good cause, and she's going to start a job next week in her alma mater in Vermont.
Well, thank you. I didn't prepare anything, but it really has been a blessing to be involved with the CommonHeart and to see the interfaith dialogue grow and blossom in this community. I know there is a lot that we have benefited from in Reading and the greater Berks area, and it is my prayer that we continue to have these kinds of events. The thing that we started all those years ago at our little meeting at the Islamic Center has really just grown and grown and grown every year, and I'm so grateful to all of you, the members of the community who have come time and time again to hear these talks and to take this opportunity to engage in open dialogue and an open, honest interest in each other's faiths. I think that is the key to world peace. So thank you all for being here. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
you got the job. Happy for that, but we will miss her very much. It is time for a break. There are some refreshments, and please feel free to note your questions, and we'll reconvene in about 10 to 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Well thought out questions. And this is, we talk about finding the common ground, and this is another way to do that, because I think through the questions and answers, whatever faith you are, you will hear the tenets of all three faiths resonating together. And that's just can do nothing but good and bring us peace. So I'll get to right to the first question that's on the agenda this evening. And Father Phil, welcome. You all know Father Phil from St. Benedict's, and he's here to field the Catholicism questions.
Somewhat.
Because Sister Eileen said so. Okay, the Middle East is a common feature in the news, especially since the rise of ISIS. How are the various faiths, who all have ties to the region, responding to the spread of this group? And do these communities have an obligation or duty to respond? And does that duty fall on any faith in particular? So that's a question, I believe, for everybody on the panel this evening. Who would like to tackle that?
I was waiting for this question, so that's why I'm ready. No, I didn't write it. I think when we talk about a group like ISIS or Boko Haram or any of those groups that have a affiliation with Islam, I think it has to be in the greater context of extremism in general. And I think the scourge of extremism is not something that's unique to any particular faith or any particular ideology or any particular region in the world. I think every society has to deal with it in some way or the other. I think they've been getting a lot of press, and they're very sensational in the type of things that they do. Of course, they're atrocities and they're despicable, all the things that we can say about them, but they're also done in a way to generate a type of sensation. They're very sensationalistic. But on top of that, what sometimes people lose sight of is that more people of their same religion have been affected by groups like ISIS than people of other religions. So of course, the 21 Christian Copts from Egypt who were killed there, most recently I think the 90 plus Syrian Christians also that were abducted and so forth. But on top of that, you have thousands, several thousand Muslims as well being affected. And the thing is, they're fueled by a particular type of ideology. And that ideology has more to do with historical events, in my view, that happened in the past 200 years than has to do with anything that's intrinsic within the prophetic teachings. In fact, they would probably consider a person like me to be an infidel. They wouldn't think I'm a proper Muslim, because I don't adhere to their particular theology. So they have a very sort of literalistic reading of Scripture. And I think every faith tradition have had groups come about that have a very literal reading of Scripture. And I'm very certain that the Catholic tradition has dealt with groups that have a very literal reading of Scripture. So when that happens, and that's why I tried to emphasize in the few minutes that I spoke, that our tradition here is a transmitted one, and one that goes from one generation to the next. We didn't have groups like ISIS before, or like Al-Qaeda, and all these type of groups. Certain power vacuums, certain social issues came up that generated groups or left a fertile ground for groups like ISIS to emerge. And if we relate it back to the issue of the common good, one of the things, especially when we talk about spiritual transformation, one of sort of the, I think, Satan's snares is that he loves to use one's internal feeling of being oppressed. because it can drive you to do almost anything, right? If you think you're being wronged, if you think you're oppressed, then you will do whatever it takes, and maybe beyond, to go after the oppressor. And one of the things that I was happy that Rabbi Brian brought up is that just as the ends have to be noble, so do the means. So we may definitely have to deal with oppression, and no question there's a lot of oppression in the Middle East. No question that, even though I'm an American, I feel I have to say that a lot of it has been perpetrated by some American foreign policy as well that has led to the result that we've seen. But the way that we deal with that oppression also should be in a manner that's commensurate with those noble teachings, should be in a noble way. So under no circumstances, for example, would I burn a person alive or behead people who had absolutely nothing to do with the oppression that is being visited upon those people. So just as the ends are noble, removal of oppression, we can all agree about that, but so do the means. And these people definitely don't use the proper means. And the reason they don't use the proper means is because they're fueled by an ideology that is more about certain historical events happening in the past 200 years or so that has anything to do with an inherent reading, or I would say an authentic reading of the Islamic tradition. And that's why they don't have any learned people. They don't have scholars amongst them. They don't have anyone of any repute endorsing what they do. You only have fringe people, and their own fringe people. They don't even have names. People don't realize this, but the self-appointed leader, that's not his name, whatever he calls himself, Abu something al-Baghdadi. It really means the father of someone from this place, from Baghdad. And they all have names like that. You can't put a real name on them. You can't tell where they're from. You can't tell who their parents are. You can't tell what type of religious training or teaching or any type of authoritative reception of this transmitted tradition at all. None whatsoever. So, myself, I studied with teachers in the Middle East, in Al-Azhar, outside of the Middle East, and all of them had a chain of transmission. All of them studied with scholars who studied with scholars that go back into an unbroken chain back to our own Prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These people don't have that. They're kind of just like, one of my teachers called them like weeds. They just sprout up, but they weren't planted with seeds. Right? Because when you plant a seed and it flowers and becomes beautiful, that's something that you look up to. But this thing, just weeds sprouting up. So we have to remove the weeds. They're a scourge. And I think any solution to them is going to involve, obviously, a military option, no question about that. But more importantly, there has to be fighting their theological stances as well. And people like myself and others and my teachers, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to be more vocal about it. We're trying to point out the issues with their particular theology that we think are very, very problematic. And, at least from a Muslim perspective, this is how we're trying to go about. And I have no doubt in my mind that in a short time, this ISIS will be something that people forgot about. Because the thing about extremism is it's not sustainable. It's self-destructive. So eventually what's going to happen, they'll split up amongst themselves, and there'll be smaller groups, and there'll be smaller groups until it self-immolates and it goes away. How long that's going to take, we don't know, but I think that's going to be their end.
Thank you very much for the clarification, the education, and the insight on that one. Appreciate it. And since the question does address whose responsibility is it of all faiths, duty and obligation, do you have a comment, Father or Rabbi?
Good evening, everyone. It's really a great evening, a great topic, and really great that all of you are here. I think any time that we can stand in the light together, fear is dispelled. And so I'm very grateful for the panel for their honesty, for their openness, and for their words tonight. As far as responsibility, and I think came up in our sessions in preparation, we are all feeling the pain. Whenever someone is suffering unjustly, whether in our religion or another religion, we all feel that pain. And so I'm not sure what we're going to do or what we can do, but we've decided tonight we would do something. And so we'll end with a special prayer for those who are unjustly dealt with. And we will offer our prayers tonight for all faiths and all people who are persecuted for their faith. So maybe it is a good place to start with prayer, but obviously some serious action is needed to deal with this problem in our world today.
I think the other thing that's important to talk about is exactly what we've heard tonight, is how much we actually share, and that we come from very similar values, although they may stem from slightly different places. And the importance of the fact that we say this out loud so we understand and appreciate each other. Because the fact of the matter is, I have always believed that I share more with the moderates of other faiths than I do with the radicals within my own faith. Because, and where I think our responsibility lies is not to be that silent majority, not to be the silent majority, is that when we see injustice, when we see extremism, to speak out and not to be afraid to speak out, because I think that's part of what we see is there's a great deal of fear. And when we realize what we share and how strong our numbers actually are when we stand together, that I think can really make a difference.
Well said. Thank you very much. El Sayed, if I could ask you to join us for this next question, and I'm going to attempt this pronunciation and hope I get it right. Now blame it on the Sheikh if I didn't get it right. And the question is, where is the Islamic Center of Reading, and is it a masjid? Masjid, or a mosque? I had asked I didn't know what that was, so now I've learned. And are there any masjids or mosques in Berks County?
The Islamic Center of Reading is 18 South Noble Street. It's a couple of blocks away from here, actually. So it's very, and has a big sign says the Islamic Center of Reading. And in the meantime, as an Islamic Center, it's also a place of worship. So meaning it's a masjid or a mosque. And we also, there is another mosque we have in downtown, Windsor Street and Front. Thank you, Windsor and Front. So we do have two worship places in Berks County. So, and the one in, it's off Lancaster Avenue, the Noble Street, it's just about open 24 hours. So, and we welcome anyone to come and ask questions and share with us what we do.
Thank you very much. This next question is interesting in light of the comments at the very beginning and talking about intergenerational things and how we learn. The question is, why do you think extremism has flourished with the younger generation, whether it be in the East or the West? Who would like to tackle that one? You're ready. I love it. Sheikh Walid?
I was waiting for that question too. So. I think this is obviously addresses a much broader issue, and as I look around the faces in this room, I see that most people are probably older than me, and I'm not that old. But you know, we need our elders. You know, and this is, I think, something that much of the younger people, whatever faith tradition they're a part of, or whether faith tradition they're not a part of, we have so much alienation in our societies now. You know, it's almost become cliche that everyone has their personal screen, whether it be an iPad or iPhone, or you know, that they go in their bedroom and they close the door and then they're just spending all the time there. And you, as a parent, you're not really sure what's going on. You hope for the best, but they're having this interaction with a whole nother world out there. They could be talking to someone in Caracas, Venezuela, or in Jakarta, Onitsha, or anywhere in the world, and having a chat or conversation. You would be oblivious to it. You wouldn't know what's going on. And I think the paradox is that in as much as we feel connected, at least from a technological perspective, we've never felt less connected from a human perspective. To the point that when people now get together for social occasions, most of the people in this room, they know how to act socially, but you take a lot of people, and no offense to 25 and unders, but the so-called millennial generation, and some of them are very socially inept. They have a difficult time talking with people or trying to, you know, order something not on their computer but on the phone, or dealing with people in person. And so such people, when I think their kind of take on reality has become skewed, because if all that you know is kind of what others are emphasizing as important to you. You know, Many of you may not be familiar with things like Facebook and Twitter and things like this, but the social media, what it does is you have a very selective, you yourself select the news feed that you see. So you select the people to follow, you select the Twitter feeds that you're looking at, and so there's a very large potential there that you're going to see a certain very segmented, skewed look at how society actually works. And then people will become more solidified in their particular affiliations, and they never hear the other side, the so-called, not just other sides, plural, as well. And when people feel alienated, when people feel alone, when people feel lonely, right? These very lonely days many of us are living now, then this is rife, I think, for them to fall into something of a narrative that gives meaning to their life, right? And that's what people are looking for. They're looking for something that gives meaning. And most people don't feel like they have meaning. Most people work their regular jobs, get home, sit in front of the internet or TV, do the same thing the next day, and so forth. And especially for our young people who never really knew anything besides this kind of technological interface they have in front of them. They never knew anything else. I grew up in a time where there were no cell phones, there was no internet. We got home from school, we go outside, we ride our bikes, we play, on the street all day. At night, and then parents look for you sometimes to bring you back inside. No one does that anymore, right? You drive through any suburban subdivision, it's like nobody lives there. You feel like it's a ghost town, like there's nothing going on. I don't know how many times I drive back and forth. I'm like, do people actually live here, or what? Everyone's in their house. There's no interaction. And I think faith traditions, people of faiths, people who have access to faith centers, whether it be the synagogue or it be the church or the mosque, have a large responsibility and opportunity to correct that situation, because this still remains, I think, one of the last bastions of social interaction that's not commercialized. Think about where people congregate outside of their house. Where they go? The mall, the movie theater. It's all commercial. It's all scripted, in a sense, and you pay money to do it. But some of the last places where that's not the case anymore is the synagogue, the church, the mosque. And I think we have to become, I think Sister Arlene said it, we have to be healers, right? One of my teachers said, like, when people walk into the mosque or whatever faith tradition place it is, it should be like a triage. Someone walks in, it's not supposed to be a judgment zone. You're not supposed to look at them and say, what are they doing here? You should welcome them with open arms and say, these people need to be healed. And one thing I've realized is that the healer gets healed via the one who's coming in, right? Because you need that. It's a two-way street. And if you don't have that, then what's left of your humanity, right? If you're just talking to yourself, one hand can't clap by itself. And so I think as people of faith, we have a tremendous responsibility, as I mentioned, and a tremendous opportunity, because I think we're only going to see extremism, not just religious-based extremism, but all types of extremism, right? We have a lot of people who are on meds, a lot of people who are taking illegal and legal substances, and many of our young people are doing this. I have a psychiatrist friend who told me that kids nowadays, they get together in parties and they bring all of the meds from their house, put it in a pillowcase, stir it up, and whatever comes out, they ingest it, they take it. This is what has become of our societies. And if we just sit back and watch, right, one of our traditions says that someone who just sits back and watch and doesn't do anything is like a silent devil. So, and I think, it's enough for good people not to do anything. So we have to do something, right? Whether it's for ourselves, for our children, so forth. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Rabbi Father, what he said?
It's interesting. Some of you probably have seen the news or heard the news already today. 3 young people were taken in custody today connected to ISIS here in our country. And so, yeah, I think, our young people, they have so much potential, and they do so many great things, and we're so proud of our young people and our teenagers. But there's that small group that gets lost, that small group that falls through the cracks, that's not connected, and then they look for somewhere else to be connected, as we just heard, and they find their own world, and unfortunately, that's not good for them, it's not good for the world.
I think also one of the things that becomes somewhat of a challenge is that doing the work of thinking and of taking responsibility for one's own actions or deciding to write one's own story is a lot of hard work and can be challenging and can be painful. Some people don't want that. They want someone to provide them with a quick and easy answer. This is what's going to make it. This is what's going to fix it. This will make it better. This will give you. This will guarantee you this, that, or the other thing. Our society goes for the quick answer, right? And so sometimes I think people look for that answer, and the extremists are the ones who are providing it. They're telling the tale the way the market wants it to be told, or some part of the market wants it to be told, and I think we need to be careful about that.
One more, are we wrapping it up? Yeah. One more question? Okay. This is, I think, for all of us in here, asking each of you on the panel, what are some of the challenges that stand in the way of the common good for us as people of faith? You get to go first again, Shaq.
You went last then, now you have to go first.
Well, it's interesting because we live in a society that's, I would say, very pluralistic, multi-valued. We have people of not just the three Abrahamic faiths that are represented here, but other faiths. We have people with no faith. We have people who believe in all sorts of things. And this country, one of the beautiful things about it, it does provide flexibility and opportunity for people to pursue whatever particular pursuits they have, of course, under the kind of social fabric assumption that it does not impinge upon the rights of others, and that's kind of been how we've been operating. I think most democracies is how that they operate. But I think one of the challenges that you will find in society such as this is that sometimes when you stand for everything, then you really stand for nothing, right? And I think we're still kind of searching for that kind of common bond. The father mentioned about the three ISIS people today. Also, in the very same day in Austria, a law was passed that mosques and imams can no longer be funded from foreign funding in Austria. And the same law was not passed against the Jewish or the Christian faiths. So I think one of the challenges that we do face is we live in a particular moment in history, right? And these moments in histories have come before. Right, and most of you who might be Catholic in this room, if you're old enough, and when you first came to this country, when John F. Kennedy was running for president, what were people saying because of his Catholic faith? Right, that was a moment in history. Now we look at it 30, 40 years ago, and 50 years ago actually, and now we're, no one would think that. A Roman Catholic candidate for president is completely normal. But if we were to suggest a Muslim candidate for president, I would say even if we were to suggest a Jewish candidate for president, people would not think that's normal. People would think that would be quite abnormal, and it's not something that they'll get behind. Or even a female candidate for president still hasn't made it to the White House. So even though Barack Obama was elected of mixed race, nevertheless, I think we're living a particular moment in history, and I have to say as a Muslim, many of my co-religionists, they're very fearful. Just a few weeks ago in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, 3 young people, very bright futures, very bright people, just blown to bits, shot in the head. And, if you believe it was over a parking dispute, which I don't believe, we may not know the real story behind it, but it has a lot of people frightened. And if we look to some of the media elites, some of the corporate elites, even some of the political elites, in the manner in which they speak about Islam, I have to be completely honest with you, if they were to substitute the word Jewish or Christian or any other, or even, I would say, homosexual, in any of those things that they say, no one will put up with it. But the reason that we are putting up with it, because we're living that particular moment in history, where I blame ourselves first, Muslims first, that we haven't done a good enough job of people getting to know us. So we still seem like this kind of exotic, doesn't really fit, maybe even fifth column type of group that people are a little bit wary of, and especially with all of the media attention that's going on. I don't blame them in that sense, but I do blame ourselves, and I think we have to do a better job of getting the message out there, of doing more things like this, of being more neighborly. Even though, I drive through the subdivision and no one's outside, maybe I can knock on somebody's door, offer them some baklava. That could be a way to help, but I think It's very, very, very challenging to do that. And societies are changing, right? It used to be that you could actually knock on a neighbor's door and, unannounced, and they'd be okay with it. Nowadays, you may knock on a neighbor's door and he might greet you with his 12 gauge. You don't know what's going to happen because societies have changed, right? There's more of this individualistic aspect to societies. So I think, once again, I would re-emphasize that faith communities have the potential and the responsibility to do a lot in this regard, because within the faith community, it's kind of like a bubble. Right, most faith communities, they kind of have their own way that they operate, and it's really a little bit different than outside. That's why people come to those faith communities, because they feel a sense of togetherness, they feel a common narrative, they feel common values. This is what attracts them. But nevertheless, the greater society outside often doesn't benefit from that. So I think one of the things I would recommend for the three panelists or the three Abrahamic faiths in general is to sort of form this type of, whether it be a local or even on a national level, a type of dialogue where we're not just speaking to each other, but we're speaking maybe in a collective voice to everybody else, right? And we're really addressing the issues that society is facing. So not just, the joke, a rabbi, an imam, and a priest go into a bar, and one of them, not on that level, just we're talking to each other, but we need to be talking to everybody else too, right? In a sense that we could be forces for positive change, and I'd be very happy to be a part of that.
Excellent again. Any other challenges? Anybody wants to? Yeah, what he said, she said. Hey, and perhaps on that last note, spreading this concept of CommonHeart to other communities, it would be one way to start that. President Obama spoke recently at the prayer breakfast, and he criticized Catholics and other Christians for centuries-old crimes. Those comments have drawn both praise and criticism. What was your reaction?
I didn't hear the statement.
Sister Eileen has a reaction to this one.
What is the quote?
President Obama, speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast, criticized Catholics and other Christians for centuries-old crimes. It drew both praise and criticism, those remarks. What is your reaction? Politics and religion don't mix. Just saying.
I'll take a stab, Joe.
Okay.
I think part of I look at that and my response. I only read about it afterwards. Did not hear it as it happened. Was I do applaud and find it concerning all at the same time. Part of me says that the understanding the traditions we come out of and the histories of what has been done in the name of our faith traditions is important to know. Part of it is because if we don't know it, as they say, history is bound to repeat itself, and that if we don't take ownership of it, that there's a danger in that. At the same time, the question of I go back to the biblical quote, which talks about visiting the iniquity of the children to the fourth and fifth generation, and when we look at the actual meaning of that, it's compared to being rewarded to the thousandth generation for doing the right thing, and not being held. It's hard for us to be held accountable for the actions of those who came before us, even if they did it in the name of our same faith, and that to hold those who lived today accountable for what was done 400 years ago seems nonsensical. The other thing that kind of came to my mind was a conversation I had with a member of my congregation who themselves is a Holocaust survivor. And we were talking about the issue of she drives a German car. And I asked her the question once, and I said, I'm going to ask a somewhat inept question, but I know a lot of survivors who say I would never buy a German car because of what they did to me. And her response was, I understand what they're saying, but at the same time, I've been back to Germany, I visited, and I know that they were not the ones who built my car today were not the ones who committed the crimes against me and my family, and therefore I'm okay doing that. It's a really interesting question, and one that I don't think has an easy answer.
So while the remarks, you get praise and criticism right there, it is right to remember and know what has happened in the past, because the past makes the present, and to not repeat it, but yet not hold this generation accountable.
And we fall into, as Sheikh Walid has said, if we don't know, if we allow ignorance to rule, then we're no better off than we were, a generation or two before, right? So we have to move beyond the ignorance.
And speaking of don't know, if we can get this last question in, because I think this is a question we all face today. Do you have any suggestions on how I can help explain to people that most terrorism today is about perverting religions in order to gain power and influence? I know this, but am seriously at a disadvantage when faced with mass media always stating Muslim and Islamist in front of the word terrorist. How do we explain that and defend our faiths and separate our faith from that extremism?
Well, I think you start off by saying that you can't defend the indefensible. I mean, I think there was a time, I recall being in conversations where, well, that's airing our dirty laundry, and we should be that ship has sailed a long time ago. So I think at this point it's very clear that, and that's why people like myself were being very vocal, that you call a spade, and those acts that are being perpetrated in the name of our religion, it drives us. We're more appalled than you can imagine, even than yourselves. And I have many of my colleagues. This is their job now. They do it day and night. In the Middle East especially, that they're on the airwaves, they're criticizing, they're pointing things out, they're pointing the theological flaws, they're trying to bring young men and women back who might fall prey to this particular narrative and so forth. But I think it's very important also that we keep in mind that if we're going to reject violence, we're going to reject terrorism, we have to reject it in all of its forms. And there are certain events that preceded the rise of a group like ISIS or Daesh or Al-Qaeda and so forth. Young people in Pakistan constantly have American drones flying over them. Young people in Yemen have American drones flying over them. They don't know where. They could just be walking outside and that thing falls upon them. So I think we have to, and this is a recruiting tool for groups like ISIS, because they'll point out the inconsistencies in American foreign policy, for example, or they'll point out the inconsistencies in the general world attitude toward things like this. So a million Iraqis could die during the boycott and during the successive wars in Iraq, and nobody lifts a finger or bats an eyelash, but tens or hundreds of other people, and the Charlie Hebdo massacre that happened in Paris, and world leaders traveled especially just to participate in a choreographed march, but yet we don't see that same type of reaction when it flips on the other side. And I said this is a recruiting tool for groups like ISIS, like Daesh. And I think when we talk about common good, we have to talk about common good with a common standard too, and not a double standard. We have to be able to have self-introspection. We have to be able to self-criticize. It doesn't help that many media pundits routinely use the word Islam or Muslims in a way that incites to violence, unfortunately. And just as I would blame Muslims who would use the same type of language, I think I would not be afraid to point out that people of other faiths or no faiths who also use this type of language is very divisive, and at the same time it could incite other people. And so I have to be honest with you, Muslims are kind of in a conundrum, because if we speak too much about that, then it seems like we're sympathetic. And at the same time, we want to convince you all that we're the nice, good Muslim and not the bad one who, cuts people's heads off, but we have to do that in a way that is palpable for a particular audience. So I think we have a difficult job in front of us, Muslims in general, to do this. But I would reiterate what I said earlier, that, sometimes we think that these grand media campaigns and Twitter campaigns and things on Facebook. I don't know how much efficacy they have, how well they work, but I think it's the small kindnesses, it's the personal interactions for me that I think are much more effective. Because if I come out of this room tonight and I go home and at least maybe a few of you are thinking a little bit different about Muslims tonight than you did before I got here, then I'm happy. Then I think that means more to me than any type of article I might write in a newspaper or any type of sort of debate I can get in with somebody who, but to touch people's hearts, which to me is the essence of faith, because you're connecting hearts, that's the whole idea. And if we're able to do that little by little, that's much more important to me, to interact with neighbors, to have these small kindnesses, to, go out and play softball together, whatever it may be. These are the type of things I think that will make people think twice about, well, I have a Muslim neighbor, I have a Muslim colleague at work, and they're not like these people. They don't look crazy like that. They don't say the same things as they do. And every group, any group can take and twist scripture, can twist other people's words to fit it in an agenda that they want to pursue. And that's what all these people that they're doing. And like I said, they're going to go away eventually, but there's no guarantee that other groups will come about, because we're living in very extreme sorts of times. Just a few weeks ago, the top two, and we're people of faith, the top two grossing movies in this country, one of them was about male domination and subjugation of a female, right? And it was a top grossing movie that weekend. And another movie was about someone who killed well over 100 people and had no remorse about it and called all those people savages. And it was an Oscar contender. That's the state that we're in. So I think it's very important that we self-introspect. We all take a real deep look at ourselves, at our society in general, and try to at least plant the seeds for the next generation, if not for the further generations.
And that's hitting home for Muslims and those who practice Islam. How about Christians and Jews? How do we defend that? And we can't control the media, and if the media is going to constantly put those two words together, how do we stand together for the common good and drive home the point that that's not the religion? It's extreme.
I think events like this, to invite people to it, to spread the word, to come to an acceptance and an understanding of each world religion and what they stand for, our own education, and then once we're educated, we have to tell the kids, we have to tell the next generation. As we heard, we call a terrorist and call them for what they are and what they do. Violence in any ways is just not acceptable. And so I think to pass on to the next generation our understanding, what we've learned from each other, from our own interaction, that we all seek to live together. We seek to be the family of God. We seek to share this common good, and we want our society to improve, to become better. And we do that with our relationships. We do that with one another, one person at a time.
I think the other part of it is that it's about the example that we set. What are the actions that we are doing that demonstrate this? The fact that we sit together tonight is one of those facts. The fact that I don't know if one of the pictures will be in the newspaper or gets written about in the newspaper, the fact that we sat together in peace and in respect of each other begins to send that message. I also think it's about the other part of it is, and it was interesting as Sheikh Walid was talking about the movies, and I think it's also about, shall we say, how we spend our money, right? The economic impact of, do we support that, or do we say that this is something we choose not to spend our money on? And that sends a message too. And we need to be aware of all of the things that we do and the implications that they have.
Thank you very much. I think we've all received some excellent takeaways from this evening's discussion and this evening's question. in the Bible, and I'm not well versed, so I can't say what book or anything, but there's a story, and I don't know if there's a similar one as well in the Torah or the Quran, but I suspect there might be after what I've learned this evening. And it talks about you don't light a candle and put a bushel basket over it. It's not why you light a candle. And I think a candle was lit here tonight. We can't control the media, but we can do our job and go out with that burning flame of common ground and common good between all of our religions. So I hope that each of us will take that along and take it home into our families and our communities. And thank you very much, all of our panelists, for the inspiration and the insight that you share, because as we learn more, we grow together. And I would like to, I would just like to welcome Father Phil, because you said we would have a prayer for peace. So if we could do that right now.
I invite Andrew to come forward and Ravina.
Get Ravina kind of
So this is we're going to say it together, right?
We heard tonight how each of these religions has experienced pain and suffering in an unjust way, and some very innocent people in all three religions have died recently or have lost their homes or their places of worship. Tonight, in our closing prayer, we just like to remember them and pray for them in remembrance. At this time now, Andrew Angstadt will cantor and kind of transition us into a time of prayer. So I just invite you to be reflective and lift up our prayers for all those who suffer because of faith.
I call on you in my distress, and you answer me, answer me. I call upon the Lord my God, and God answers me, answers me. Oh, save me from lying lips, from deceitful tongues. May they see your arrows, Lord, the fire of your wrath. Too long I live with men of hate, men who lust for war. Though I speak for peace, my God, they will not listen, Lord. I call upon you, Lord, in my distress, and you answer me, answer me. I call upon the Lord my God, and God answers me. He answers me.
I light this candle in remembrance for all those worldwide who have been persecuted, ridiculed, or taken hostage because of their faith.
I light this candle of remembrance for all those worldwide who have been displaced from their homes and places of worship because of their faith.
Press that down. Pull it.
Well, actually, my prayers are just a little bit longer than that since. Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, I'm not with the program. Okay, I light this candle of the remembrance of all those worldwide who have been unjustly killed because of their faith.
The blessing of peace. Nish'al ma'en hashalom, izal katal, ya'arof kamatar hashalom, v'timla ha'aret shalom kamayim layam mechasim, nivarech et ha'en ha'chayim, v'kol nitbarech. Eternal wellspring of peace, may we be drenched in the longing for peace, that we may give ourselves over as the earth to the rain, to the dew until peace overflows our lives, as living waters overflows the sea. As we bless the source of life, so are we blessed. Baruch atah Adonai oseh hashalom. Blessed are you, O God, the creator of peace.
St. Francis' prayer for peace. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I might not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying to self that we are born to eternal life.
I guess since we are all doing the prayer from our own faith tradition, I just wanted to explain what I'm going to recite, but I'll just recite the translation. I have combination of a few different prayers, and the first one is called Al-Fatiha, mean the opening is from the Quran, and Al-Fatiha is the opening is the first chapter of the Holy Quran, and the 7 verses are prayer for God's guidance and praise and God's lordship and mercy. And this chapter is very important to Muslims, and it has a very much similarity to the Lord's Prayer for Christian and also the prayers of Shema for the Jewish tradition. And we recite this prayer 17 to 40 times a day. Muslims do that all around the world. Hundreds and millions of Muslims are reciting this. So I'll recite the translation. In the name of God, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy, praise belongs to God, Lord of the world, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy, Master of the day of judgment. It is you we worship. It is you we ask for help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those that you have blessed, those who incur no anger and who have not gone astray. And at the end, we usually say, Amen. Now I'll read the prayer of peace. Send thy peace, O Lord, which is perfect and everlasting, that our soul may radiate peace. Send thy peace, O Lord, that we may think, act, and speak harmoniously. Send thy peace, O Lord, that we may be contented and thankful for thy bounty gifts. Send thy peace, O Lord, that amidst our worldly strife we may enjoy thy bliss. Send thy peace, O Lord, that we may endure all, tolerate all, in the thought of thy grace and mercy. Send thy peace, O Lord, that our life may become a divine vision, and thy light all darkness may vanish. Send thy peace, O Lord, that our father and mother, that we, thy children on earth, may all unite in one family. O God, your peace, from you comes peace. Do you return peace? Revive us with the salutation of peace and lead us to your abode of peace. And finally, Muslims usually end the gathering with this advice from the Holy Book, the Quran. It's a chapter 103, the translation. By the declining day, mankind is deep in loss, except for those who believe, do good deeds, urge one another to the truth, and urge one another to steadfastness. And I send the prayer, peace and prayer and blessing on Prophet Muhammad, Jesus, Moses, and all the prophets who we haven't mentioned, and peace and blessing to all of you, and thank you for coming.
The Lord bless you and keep you.
The Lord let
His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you kindly and give you peace.
Amen.
Just one last note, that as I'm a Muslim in Berks County, I just wanted to also relay this message to all of you, that we are very honorable to be part of Berks County and part of the community, and we are flourished in Berks County as well as our kids, and we're so proud to be a part of this community. We've never been treated bad. We always treated the excellent, and that's why we have businesses, and that's why our businesses still open, because of everybody. Thank you very much. Have a blessing evening, and thank you for coming. And thank you very much, Joe Painter.
Build a 3-lane.